Yeah, look, we're certainly very constructive on the copper price. It's been one of our two key picks over the last 12 months. We've seen it rally very strongly from 8,000 US a tonne all the way up to now 9,800, and we think it's on a clear path through 10.5 and 11,000, and wouldn't be surprised if it tests our bullish forecasts of $12,000 a tonne by the end of the year.
What's been driving the price higher in recent months?
Yeah, I mean, every commodity is just about supply and demand. So on the demand side, it's just very, very positive for copper. Everything electrification is copper intensive. So from electric vehicles to renewable energies, it's much more than about just China now. It's about the world needing more copper. Then if we look on the supply side of things, we've seen a number of troubles at the big South American miners. It's reduced some of the supply out of the market. But furthermore, the longer term structural deficit is just due because there's been a lack of investment in new copper mine development. So what we really need to see is a sustained period of elevated copper prices to encourage more investment into the sector.
Just briefly on China, could the price be weighed if the property sector doesn't improve from where it is at the moment?
Yeah, look, our opinion is that the property sector in China has probably passed its trough now. We think it's got as bad as it's going to get. We've seen some spectacular companies in China fail now in the property sector. We've seen consumer sentiment there really hit a low, and we're actually starting to see just a few little green shoots. Now, I think the government there has made it clear that the next version of growth in the Chinese economy is not going to be driven by property investment. They want the Chinese economy now to get more diverse. They want the middle class to develop and become a bigger consumer of goods. And also they want to become the global supplier of everything to do with renewable energies and electric vehicles. And that's really where they're incentivising their market to go. So we don't think the property market in China is about to come roaring back. But at the same time, we think we're through the worst of the days there for the property cycle there.
You touched on established mines overseas. A very big established operation is winding down in Australia. Glencore will close its Mount Isa copper mine next year. Is Australia going to continue to be one of the world's major suppliers of copper?
Look, I think we are. I mean, we saw BHP recently complete the takeover for Oz Minerals, and within that takeover, you know, they acquired some very large copper assets there in South Australia, and they'll look to continue to expand the production of those assets. We have seen a lack of large new discoveries of copper in Australia. There's a number of juniors which are busily out there drilling to try to make the new discovery. There's a number of projects which have sort of been trapped in that scoping study stage, but the copper price hasn't been good enough to really get the financing to develop those projects. But we might start to see some movement there now with some of these projects that have been sort of on the shelf for a long period of time. But no, I think Australia will continue to be a big producer of copper in the years ahead.
Does the current supply pinch mean some of the country's smaller copper mines are now looking ripe for takeover?
I think that's quite possible. Yeah, we've got some troubled mines such as, Aeris Resources, A1M, even Cyprium, which, went into insolvency effectively, and they've tried to do a restructure. I mean, those mines do actually have quite large and well drilled out resources. And so we've seen that a new company, Metal Acquisitions Corp, they recently listed on our markets. They did a big acquisition of an old copper mine over on the East Coast. They're looking at doing more acquisitions here in Australia. They've publicly stated that. So I do think that there'll be some interest in picking up and dusting off some of the old files and seeing at what price do those mines actually make good money and good cash flow for the owners.
Giuliano, is the rise in the copper price good news for the federal government? Just this week, it's been managing fiscal expectations ahead of next month's budget, citing the decline in the iron ore price.
Yeah, look, unfortunately from a federal government perspective, I don't think the copper markets and the volumes that we see from copper will really be able to offset much of the softness we've seen in iron ore. In Australia, the big royalties for the federal government's really about iron ore, it's about coal and it's about LNG, and then copper's, a very distant, fourth sort of a commodity. So I don't think that they're going to be able to make up for the lost royalties in the iron ore sector over the last year.
It is considered a barometer of global economic health, though. Do you believe that the rise in the copper price is telling us something about where the world's economy is headed?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because after so many interest rate rises, both here in Australia and overseas, you'd expect the global economic environment to actually be slowing at the moment. But we've seen incredible resilience here in Australia, in North America, and we're actually seeing the UK and the European markets probably come off their lows. So I think that, yes, it is telling us that perhaps the worst is behind for some economies. But I think the other thing it's really telling us is that the end users of copper have changed now. So there's a new end user, and that's this whole electric vehicle thematic and the whole renewable energy thematic. It's very copper intensive, and that didn't exist 10 years or 20 years ago. So basically we have a new player in the game. We have a new user of the commodity that that really has incredible demand over the next 1 to 2 decades.
Giuliano, Sala, Tenna, thank you.
Thank you.